Hi, folks. You're with rather Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about just how long the globalist deep state propaganda machine, coordinated, centrally scripted propaganda machine, has been going on for. Now, we tend to see it in terms, because of the Twitter files recently, we tend to see it in terms that it's fairly recent. It's social media. It's confined to certain corners of the wider media landscape and so on. I think one thing that the Twitter files and information is still coming out from there, and other stuff now that's coming out, just how far it goes and how coordinated and well-funded and organised it is. And that's catching the extent of it, the magnitude of it is catching some people by surprise. Even media heavies like Tucker Carlson sort of is raising his eyebrows thinking, wow, I didn't think it went this wide and this deep. I've been concerned about this for a long time. When I first started talking about it, I had people looking at me like I was some sort of crazy, but this is when I first started traveling as a business traveling as a young man, early 20s in the 1980s. I noticed it then, quite by accident, because I would often travel to quite a few locations because I was a junior flunky really in the office. They used to move, like they used nights and weekends to fly me around, so I never had a minute to myself really. I got very good at sleeping on airplanes and that sort of thing, and it was coach class, and I got in shitty hotels and three-star hotels, that sort of stuff, and I noticed the difference by traveling. My bosses, they got the 5-star, and I was still stuck down in coach. Nonetheless, for most part, I traveled on my own, and they put me on a fairly tight leash in terms of I might have 3 meetings in a day across 3 different cities, one end of the continent to the other, or whatever. So what happened was then, and this is the pre-internet days now, I used to be able to get the newspapers, and when you're sort of traveling on a plane for hours, you tend to look at, try and get reading material like the magazines and newspapers they offer you on board. The cleaning regimen back in those days wasn't very good, so there'd only be certain airport hubs where they'd clean the aeroplanes. So you'd often have yesterday's newspaper in the pocket in front of you, and then you'd have a newspaper in Los Angeles and New York, and if you stopped if it stopped on the way in sort of Philadelphia, there'd always be someone who'd come on board with a newspaper, like the local Philadelphia newspaper, which you'd get. So I'd sort of grab that. I'll read that. The guy gets off. So I even ask people, have you finished with that? And I'd have a read. So I got to read a lot of newspapers across multiple cities, but within one narrow time slot. And back in those days, the globalists were really pushing family division. They were really pushing divorce, and the trying to create gender conflict and so on. So the newspapers at the time were awash with stories about men oppressing women, men abusing children, abusing women. 99% of women are beaten senseless every day by the evil fascist Nazi husbands and so on. Now, these sort of stories were really implausible, and these were in the early days of the NGOs, like the Amnesty Internationals. They were the first round of NGOs to be co-opted into the globalist propaganda machine, and even then, the UN, the United Nations, was already succumbing to being part of that machine. And I went to New York once, and there was some sort of meeting there, the UN, like the equality for women thing, and so I was just next to the hotel I was at, so I thought I wandered along, and no one queried me. I just walked in the door, and it was clear that the United Nations was just a a radical feminist playground. They were just children with toys, and that was sort of my first. And I'm in my I'm like 25 or something at the time, so I'm looking at this thinking these women are all children and behaving like it, and I'm thinking, wow, what's going on here? This can't lead to a good place. And so I saw these newspapers with all these claims of all men are violent oppressors and women are better off getting divorced and so on. And there was a real push on it back in the day. And the justification was that women are being so badly oppressed by their evil, wicked husbands that they have to leave. They've got no choice. Did you know? And that's statistics. They claim statistics. Women, 35% of women will be abused. And many will experience death. And it was all. Even as a kid, I could say, wow. I mean, if it's that widespread, how come I don't know anyone who's in this category? Why don't I see this? I know quite a lot of people. Why? Surely, if it was as widespread as they say, I'd know about it. I don't know anyone sort of. I mean, in my family growing up, and in all the people I knew, I never saw that. So they must be confined to certain areas. Maybe it's only everyone I don't know it's happening to. So I doubted, just on balance. I looked at it and thought that can't be right. Now, I was swaying to some extent because at the time when some men were getting absolutely destroyed in the divorce courts, I would still be I'd be on the fence of, well, maybe they did something wrong. Maybe they were bad because, all that stuff in the newspaper about all these bad men. Maybe that was one of the bad men. Maybe that's why they lost the house and their legal rights were taken away. Maybe that's it. So I'd be unsure, but one of the other things that I used to see that it was a coordinated, or when I realized rather it was a coordinated media campaign and totally and centrally scripted, was I would see a story in the New York Times which say that 1 in 3 women is abused every day, based on an academic in Los Angeles, for example, or San Francisco, or somewhere along the west coast there of the United States. And it would quote those stats and say an academic study had said so. But then when I'd go to Philadelphia or read the paper from Philadelphia, remember it's in the same 24-hour window, the paper in Philadelphia, it would say exactly the same thing. It was written by the same person. They barely changed a word, except they'd say there was a different academic. They'd say it was a local Philadelphia academic had done a study and had found that, but had found exactly the same thing. They would have a couple of horror stories there that Billie Jean from Philadelphia said that this, and then she's the abused woman and the victim and all that sort of thing. But the person in Los Angeles was also had the same name, Billie Jean, and had the exact same story. So hold on a minute, the exact same story with just a couple of the place names changed, and the exact same story in Philadelphia and Los Angeles. Then I get to New York and get the paper there, and it's got the exact same story again, except this time it's saying, remember this is pre-internet, saying that it's a local New York academic which is saying this. So wait a minute, in different areas of the country with different climates and different socioeconomic mixtures and all this sort of thing, there's the exact same outcome that's produced by every study, and with the exact same abuses occurring as incurred. No, that just can't be right. Now, still, I'm a young guy. I'm pretty apolitical, really, at the time. My days of being a radical communist really are confined to, I don't know, between the ages of 17 and 19, I suppose. but anyway, these the same story. So I thought, hold on a minute, this is coordinated and scripted. This is centrally scripted. It can't be accurate. It can't be. It's got to be propaganda. Why would these different newspapers? And I'd be, going around the country in the US. So the newspapers are owned by different people. So company X owns this newspaper, but company A or B owns the other newspaper, and company Z owns another newspaper. Yet they've all got the same story saying the exact same thing. No, No, not possible. And you would see the same thing even in a local. I remember going through a rural area in Texas and getting a local newspaper there. Say a town of, I don't know, 50,000 and quite quiet and white and rural, and a lot of farming areas around. And they get the local newspaper, and they've got the same thing in there. So it's a widely applied and circulated propaganda campaign saying that all women are abusers. All women are being abused, and they should leave their husbands, and they should file for divorce. Did you know how easy divorce is to get? Did you know you can get the house? Call your local counsellor, and you can get free legal aid, and so on. So all this stuff's going on. Then there was also propaganda campaigns about men not paying child support. Now, the propaganda depiction, and bear in mind that at the time, 85% of marriages were being ended by women who were leaving the men. But the depiction was always he had abandoned her. So he was really rich, filthy, stinking fucking rich, and he had abandoned her. The poor little put upon little woman. She's always depicted this tiny little skinny little thing, and he's depicted as this huge guy who's rich, driving a fucking fancy sports car, and he's not paying her a cent in child support. And she's got 50 million kids. They're all starving. They're on the street, and they're being, she's at the mercy of the evil universe. And if only this guy would pay his child support. Now, I saw that in a newspaper just as I was flying out of Los Angeles back to Sydney, and they had the Sydney newspaper that they brought in as the flight, the Qantas flight had come in from Sydney. And I noticed the same story in that newspaper about the child support, exactly the same. Again, the same person had written the fucking story. They changed the name to be Australia, and they'd done a few little cosmetics, but it was the same story. So the exact same guy driving the exact same car in the exact same conditions is not paying his child support. I mean, that's bullshit. That's clearly organised propaganda again. Now, I did some investigation and found that there were three men in the whole of Australia who had the sort of wealth that's referenced in three men who'd been divorced who had the sort of wealth that was talked about in this propaganda, but they depicted as if all men are rich multi-gazillionaires refusing to pay child support, which simply isn't true. Now, I even chased down one of a man who had and who actually wasn't paying the child support, but as he pointed out, his ex-wife had actually left him, and she not only got 2 free houses, fully furnished, with a luxury car and a lump sum and stocks and shares and lots of jewellery, and so not only got all that, but the shares were paying dividends and he just pointed out, hey, she's an absolute spendthrift, and I've already given her gazillions. Why should I give her any more? And he paid, the lump sum he paid was meant to be in lieu of child support, but she'd spent it all and then was trying to drag him back into court to get more. And she'd succeeded in the court. The judge, yeah, that's right, you're rich, give her more money. And he was appealing it. It was going through the legal process. But that was sort of allegedly a typical example. One was mentioned on a radio program too, that he was sort of held up, without naming him personally, he was held up as an example of, rich guy refusing to give her a penny, the damn Nazi, when in fact, again, she'd got, multiple houses, gazillions of dollars in jewelry, shares and stocks and all sorts of other bits and pieces thrown in. But the propaganda was all around. So I saw it there as well. So there's propaganda at various sort of fronts, but all of it was very anti-male. Men are abusers, men are oppressors. The reason a marriage breaks up is because of him. He did it. No matter how generous a settlement the woman gets, it's always him who's not paying. It's not her who's being careless with money. It's him. And every sort of piece that I read inferred that the only way we can solve this, it's a huge social problem, and the only way we can solve it is because these men are naturally brutal, men are naturally evil, and the only way we can solve this is by tightly controlling men. And so all sorts of laws were being brought out, such as where women can take out an injunction order against a man and say, I feel fear that he may hurt me or do something to me. An apprehended violence order, is AVO, as they would call. And they don't require evidence. Now, initially, when this came out, the woman had to have evidence. But when a woman would get killed by a man, regardless of what the situation might be, for example, there was two drug addicts, man and woman drug addicts, and they were arguing over the drugs, and they had a struggle, and she pulls a knife, and they have a struggle. She cuts him, he gets the knife off her and kills her, and so on. So it's hardly a case of domestic abuse, but that was used as a propaganda thing to say, well, look, there you go, a violent, evil, oppressive man killing a woman, he's fucking Hitler. So that was used as propaganda as well, and was bandied around, saying, well, why should women have to prove that they're being threatened by? We all know men are evil and threatening towards women. We all know that women are victims. We all know that men are oppressors. Ideologically, we know this. So any woman should be able to go into any court and say, I want an apprehended violence order against Billy Bob. No evidence needed, just an assertion. That's it. Also, there are other things that were going on as well, such as a woman has a child, but she never knew who the man was, or claims not to, the male contributor to the conception. And and so she's fine. Maybe her parents have got money or something, and she's motoring along quite happily. And then suddenly something goes wrong, and she applies to get a government benefit of some sort. And the policy of the government is, well, we're not going to give you any money, so you tell us who the man is. Well, I don't know who the man is, she says. Well, who do you think it might be? Oh, it might be Billy Bob. Well, Billy Bob who? Oh, I don't know. Somewhere in Sydney, or somewhere in Australia, or somewhere in America. So then they wanted to have access to look at everyone with the name Billy Bob Smith or whatever, and find out, well, who, there are 5 people called Billy Bob Smith, and 4 of them are unemployed labourers. The other guy's got a pretty good job and gets paid good money. Why don't we say it's him? And so a process was set up where Billy Bob Smith could just arbitrarily have his bank account raided by the government without his knowledge or consent, without any proof or evidence. It's just her saying, I think it's Billy Bob Smith, and he can have his bank account emptied by that. Now, if he's got a problem with that, he has to go take it to court, which can be 2 or even 3 years. He can only get a DNA test on the children, his DNA. He can only get it if the mother agrees, if the woman agrees. If the woman doesn't agree, he can't get it. And the woman is advised by the legal aid radicals. If you've got any doubt it's him, like it might be one of those labourers who are penniless. If you've got any doubt that it's him, you need to say no to the DNA test. Because if you say yes, and it's proved he's not the DNA match, then one of these other guys is going, you won't get any child support out of them. That they don't make any money. He's the only guy who can pay you decent child support. So there are various other things. Even if the guy wins in court, he can't get the money back from her, and this sort of stuff. So the law after law was changed, which radically altered, in my view, the social structure of marriage, its reliability, its dependability, the desire of people to invest in the future, and this sort of thing. So you had guys who were getting remarried and said, well, why should I invest in the future when at any time she can leave me for any reason or no reason, and she gets a free house? Why would I invest in a future like that? And this is, I fully understand that. But the propaganda campaign, the anti-male propaganda, all men are violent, all men are oppressors, is the same ideological architecture that all white people are white supremacists, all white people are racist. It was the same ideological architecture of guilt and blame, just being invented, and propaganda being pushed in all directions. Now, this was the pre-internet days, so they were using the newspapers and the magazines and the radio stations, the TV stations to do this. So now, again, at the time, I noticed the coordination, and I'm just one guy. Not many people would be flying around the world like that, or would be avid newspaper readers. So I probably had a unique front row seat to seeing all this as they were setting it up. But I started, it became so obvious to me, at least. I started talking to people about it, saying, "Hey, this is all coordinated. This is no rando thing. The whole thing's coordinated. It's scripted. The stories are almost exactly the same. Therefore, it's being centrally scripted, and so on." But and a lot of people told me, "Oh, you're crazy. That's nonsense." And it's just lazy journalistic plagiarism. And I accept that there may be a bit of a drift of that, and it may mean a bit of slippage in that direction. I don't doubt that could have happened, but not with the tightness of coordination, not with the precision of timing and the placement and how. And also I noticed how the article saying all men are evil, violent oppressors would go out, and then that very day or the next day, a politician would be up on the podium with some alleged victim, and would go, "There we go. Well, I'm going to protect Billie Jean here from all those bad men. I'm a big hairy-chested tough guy politician. You can vote for me, girls," and so on. So this was, again, the coordination between the body politic and on both sides, the body politic and the media. Already that was evident there. That coordination was already there, and that it's now been transferred into, or it now includes rather, the social media landscape. Then that's not to be surprised, because that structure was already in place. They just need to extend it to the next stage. Now, because social media was too fractured all over the place, they had to create additional, if you like, functionaries to manage it all, whether it's through NGOs or these bullshit front think tanks or the World Economic Forum or divisions of the United Nations. It hardly matters, but they had to extend it and widen it and broaden it and infiltrate smaller subsets of media, such as in social media, in order to have that same level of control that they had previously, and more importantly, not lose control of the narrative. So they were able to create these narratives, all men are violent and this sort of thing. They were able to create these narratives and maintain them through control of the international media. And I noticed just how much the government was getting involved, even centre-right governments. I knew a journalist who wrote a scathing piece about the divorce courts and about the corruption as his investigations yielded, the corruption within the divorce courts, how they hire radical feminist men-hating activists to do psychological appraisals of families for the divorce courts, where these angry lesbian women give 100% outcomes. The demands are bad, evil, violent oppressor, 100% outcomes, which isn't possible in the real world, and how these people were being protected and how they were handpicked to do that sort of stuff, and how the divorce courts were secretly focusing on only hiring gender studies lesbians and this sort of thing. So he exposed some of that, and at the time, the federal attorney general directly wrote to the executive editor of that media outlet, saying, "Look, don't let this guy put articles out. Do not say these sorts of things. Do not reduce confidence in the court. You don't cause a situation where people doubt the independence and impartiality of what is a radically activist court." And I was surprised that the nation's top law officer was directly intervening and making veiled threats, effectively, against the newspaper. That, you know, don't talk about this sort of thing. It's the narrative. It's the international globalist narrative, and we don't want you to talk against it, and we don't want you to expose it. We don't want you to bring it to the public's attention that it's what's going on. And duly enough, the newspaper backed off, or the media outlet rather backed off. Okay, all right, we won't talk about it. And that's incredible that those sort of things were happening. And these things are happening 25, 30 years ago. So I just want to make it clear that this narrative control, suppression of alternative points of view, scripting from a central script, all that sort of stuff, that's been going on for, I would speculate, 35 plus years. And really that architecture of narrative control and narrative placement and the crushing and squashing of alternative positions and viewpoints, they're probably better at it now than they were then. But that architecture's been there for a while. And what we're seeing, it's now got into social media, and again to a level and extent that we hadn't imagined. But that's just how serious the globalist cabal is. They've got an unsaleable product, and the only way they can get across the line is by total control of the media. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.